Good morning, everyone. We're going to make a start. My name's Diane Webb and I'm going to be your MC for today. I'd like to start by asking Auntie Nola to welcome us to this beautiful country.
Thank you, Di. I acknowledge with heart Sky Country, Saltwater Country, and everyone's journey in between. My people are Pakana, and I'm from the Mansell and Brand family, and my ancestors are the Trawulway people from Cape Portland, northeast of Tasmania, Ludowita. I'm a traditional owner and connected to country. Today we stand on the country of Lita Mariner, Panaher and Taranata Pana, with respect. I would like to acknowledge with pride my elders past and present and the Aboriginal community and wider community in attendance here today. I acknowledge the wider community for their support they have given Aboriginal people across this country for many years. I thank them. The land of our ancestors, and it's now our responsibility to care and protect this land. I acknowledge with deep respect my old people, the traditional owners of this land, who once walked the tracks of this country. We know our land is sacred, and our people have been here since time began. The land holds our past, our present, and our future. I extend my respect to elders as the knowledge sharers of our culture. The shell necklace stringers, the water carrier makers, the weavers, the mutton birders, the artists and storyteller, and our families that keep our knowledge alive and breathing. My old people once danced around fires, held ceremonies, yarned and sang songs and country. They are still here in the country, in the trees, in the wind, and they will always be here as we are. With deep respect, I acknowledge Aboriginal warriors that fought for our land and lost their lives. I honour them. With deep respect, I acknowledge the Tasmanian Aboriginal community that fought for this and still does for land rights, polities, changes, better health, legal education, housing and language. I honour them. I acknowledge and pay respect to our people that did not make elders status. They are in the community's thoughts and never forgotten. Our ancestors loved and cared for country for thousands of generations, handing down stories that can be told today. Not the ones in books, but the ones handed down by their parents and grandparents and their parents. Stories of kurikaina, mutton birding, collecting shells along the beaches and living off the land and sea, taking only what was needed. We are strong people, we're still here, connected to family and community and country. I wish you every success today as you go about your business. With heart, I acknowledge that we are on Aboriginal land. Please be safe as you journey home to your loved ones. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Auntie Nola. I'd like to now welcome Kate Garvey, who's our Acting Director of Public Health Programs and Priorities in the Department of Health, who'll do the opening of the forum for us. Thanks, Kate.
Thanks, Diane. Thanks, Auntie Nola, for your wonderful welcome to country. Thank you. So as Di said, my name's Kate Garvey and I'm from the Tasmanian Department of Health. And I welcome you to this forum, and I guess I acknowledge the diverse range of skills and knowledge in this room, and I really hope you have a wonderful day today and get to share that knowledge and skills and also take something new away from today. So I guess I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are meeting today on the land of the Kanamaluka, the Tamar River. I respectfully acknowledge the Tasmanian Aboriginal people as the owners and custodians of the land, waters and sea of Lutruwita, this place we are also privileged to call home. I pay my deepest respect to the Palawa of Lutruwita, Aboriginal elders past, and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people present here today. Aboriginal people are the knowledge holders and provide best practice in promoting health and wellbeing for Aboriginal people. I also acknowledge the ongoing work of Aboriginal managed organisations in building health literacy and ensuring continued health and wellness. Today's Health Literacy Forum is about sharing information and building collaborative action to ensure that all Tasmanians can access, understand, remember and use health information and services to support them to make decisions every day for health and wellbeing. So we at the Department of Health have worked with our partners in the Health Literacy Network to bring you today's forum. And these partners have been around for a long time. I was asking Di, how long have we been doing this? And she said, you know, and I've worked in this area for about 9 years and I think it's been going well beyond that. So our partners who are strong partners that bring all kinds of skills and knowledge and money and resources are Primary Health Tasmania, 2610, Consumers Health Tasmania, TasCos and UTAS. And I'm sure there's many others, Di, that if we were to go through, people come from a wide range of areas to support us. I'd especially like to thank Primary Health Tasmania for sponsoring the recording of our keynote presentations and 2610 for sponsoring the catering. I think one thing about a partnership and a long-term partnership is that people contribute a wide variety of things. And some of those things are ongoing commitment. And I think we can see that if we look around the room here today. So we know that all Tasmanians will experience moments when their health literacy is compromised. And I'm sure many of you have stories about how that impacts on everyone every day. Health literacy is influenced by our individual circumstances and our social settings. Tasmanians have a diverse range of lived experience and health literacy strengths, as do we all here today. We acknowledge that our systems and our culture sometimes create additional barriers that impact on people's health and wellbeing, and we're trying to overcome those, and we're trying to learn and do that all the time, just to think, how can we just change the systems and the processes so that it's so much easier for people to just get what they need and to make their own decisions. So health literacy is also a key focus area under the Tasmanian Government's Healthy Tasmania 5-year strategic plan. So this is a plan that aims to guide preventive health activity across the whole of government. It's also really important that it's a partnership with community. Government is only one piece of the puzzle. So the Premier and the Minister for Mental Health and Wellbeing, who's also our Minister for Health, Tourism and Trade, the Honourable Jeremy Rockcliffe, he really wanted to be here today, but he's in Parliament doing his job. But he sends his apologies for not being able to attend, and he's also prepared a video message. So today we're also taking the opportunity to launch what we're calling the Healthy Tasmania Fund, which is money that is to be directed to the community for the purposes that community see where they are. So we've got a video from Jeremy Rockcliffe that we're going to play now for you. Thank you. I better hop out of the way.
Hello everyone, and I am sorry that I cannot be there with you at the Healthy Literacy Forum today to officially launch the Healthy Tasmania Fund. As a government, we realise all Tasmanians should have the opportunity to live their best lives for as long as possible in communities that support connections to people, a place and culture. This is the vision of our Healthy Tasmania 5-year strategic plan, our long-term strategic plan to improve the health and wellbeing in our beautiful state. For this to happen, we need to take effective preventative health actions to keep people healthy and well. The focus of Healthy Tasmania are priority populations, health literacy, mental health and wellbeing, active living, eating well, smoke-free communities, reducing alcohol harm, and climate change and health. In March this year, I had the pleasure of launching our new Healthy Tasmania 5-year strategic plan for 2022 to 2026 at the Burnie Community House. The plan brings community services and all levels of government together to work in partnership to improve health and wellbeing for all Tasmanians. A key component of our Healthy Tasmania plan is the Healthy Tasmania Fund that provides funding to individuals, organisations and local councils for community-led projects focused on improving health and wellbeing. Our government has committed $8 million over 4 years to the fund, and following a review by the Department of Health, I am pleased to announce there are now 4 grant streams. The first grant stream is Step Forward, which is targeted towards not-for-profit community sector organisations, local government and individuals or community groups that are sponsored by a not-for-profit organisation or local government providing one-off grants of up to $5,000. The second grant stream is Lift Local, that provides grants of up to $20,000 to local councils. A focus on helping priority populations comes under the third Healthy Focus grant stream, of which there will be 2 rounds providing between $20,000 to $100,000 to not-for-profit community sector organisations and local government. And the fourth stream, Healthy Together, will provide grants of up to $300,000 with 8 communities to be selected to participate in 2023. The Healthy Tasmania Fund brings people together as part of a broader and more coordinated funding approach to support communities. It also places a particular focus on health literacy, empowering communities to have the knowledge, the skills and the confidence to access, understand and remember information and services to make decisions about their own health and wellbeing. And I encourage individuals, organisations and local governments to consider how these grants may benefit your community as we all work towards a common goal of improving the health and wellbeing of all Tasmanians. Thank you.
Premier. So I guess there was a lot of detail in that, and we do have some of our Healthy Tasmania team here today to answer questions in the breaks, and there'll also be further information online. I guess I just wanted to take a couple of moments of your time to talk about the Healthy Tasmania Fund and why we're doing it differently. So we've done some local research, and that involved probably many people in this room. So we talked to community sector organisations, we talked to volunteers, we talked to people about how the fund helped or didn't help. So what we know is that if grants funding like this is designed in the right way, it can be really useful for organisations. It can help them identify, harness and grow local resources that enable health and wellbeing in their communities. So when we talk to people, we heard that these resources can be programs, these resources can be buildings, these resources can be equipment, but that people also talked about other resources, such as trusting relationships, such as safe places where people can come together to work out what their local priorities are. People talked about hope for the future and connections to their community. We also learnt that grants funding can sometimes do more harm than good, and that if it's not part of a more comprehensive and coordinated action to support health and wellbeing, small communities can be burdened by our processes. There's complexity of applications and reporting, and different government departments sometimes are funding the same thing in different ways, which can be quite confusing. So when provided in the right way, grants funding is useful for communities to adapt and sometimes use other ideas from other places and adapt them to their local needs. Grants funding can be useful to test new ideas and capture local insights, but also to come together and talk about where there are gaps, or even just to understand the problems that are present in their community more. So we've learned that it will be important to coordinate our funding efforts across government and to work with other government departments, but also to advocate for longer term investment in activities that are shown to be effective in communities. So providing funding as part of long-term relationships between government and communities means that we can learn together, learning from community action that can influence ongoing government policy and future investment. So we have reshaped the Healthy Tasmania Fund with the aim of making it easier to apply for and responsive to community needs. So this means we're really funding a much broader range of activities, some outside of the traditional, health promotion activities. That even means funding people to come together in networks and partnerships. We're also doing more to support people to develop their ideas and to apply for the funding so that they can access best available evidence. We're also bringing people together on a regular basis so we can learn together as we go about what works and doesn't in communities. We're also working with other government departments so that we can start to have consistent processes, and also we might jointly fund things or work out other ways to fund in an ongoing way things that are working well. So I guess the theme for today's forum is leaving no one behind. And this is in recognition that health literacy is so tightly linked to health equity. The way that we make information, resources and our services accessible has a direct impact on people's health and wellbeing. Today you will be presented with evidence and ideas as well as resources that are aimed at making health information and services more accessible for all Tasmanians. I hope you enjoy today's forum and leave feeling energised and inspired, and I hope you take what you learn to a new level by doing something slightly different or maybe more of what you know is already working. It is now my great pleasure to introduce Mara Snyder, who I'm sure is known to all of you, who will interview our keynote speaker, Dr. Chandel Elmer. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a great day. Thanks. Bye.
It's all right. For coming and acknowledging that we actually have quite a large number of people who are joining us online. So thank you for joining us for the morning session. And just to give a bit of an overview, hopefully you have all got your programs. So we will be having two conversations to start with, a break for morning tea, and then some small what we call speed dating sessions that give you a bit of an overview and whet your appetite to go and find out a little bit more about some of the activities that are happening around Tasmania. As Kate said, the theme for today is leaving no one behind, and that means listening to the voices of people, really hearing those voices, and also having good conversations. And we really hope that that's a theme that's really strongly representative throughout the forum today. So I'm now going to hand over to Mara, who's actually going to start the first conversation with Dr. Chandel Elmer, getting beyond the average to find better ways and more equitable ways from the 2018 ABS Tasmanian Health Literacy Cluster Analysis.
Hello everybody, my name's Mara Schneiders, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm a Health Policy Officer with Public Health Services. and it is my absolute pleasure to be here today with Dr. Shandell Ilmer.
Thanks, Mara. It's lovely to be here. It's always nice to I know many people in the room and online most likely, and it's lovely to be back in Tasmania. I've been living in Melbourne for the last 3 or so years, so it's nice to come back home. Always good to come home.
And it's lovely to have Shan home again. We have about half an hour, and Michelle's going to time keep for me because somebody's got to keep us on track. And there will be time at the end to ask some questions. So if something pops to your mind, just write it down or keep a note of it, ready for that section. And I just wanted to say a few things about Shan. I know that you've got something in the program, but Dr. Shandell Ilmer, just to say formally, has a rich and long profile. So I'm not going to go into all the details, but I just wanted to comment on her. I guess she started from a nursing background and has moved on through community and health and academia over many, many years. And I've had the fortune to work with Shan for a number of years, first with the University of Tasmania and since she moved to Swinburne in Melbourne. And I wanted to mention, I guess, 2 qualities that I've observed. She's got more than 2, but I just want to focus on 2 today. One is her heart, because Shan has an incredible compassion and heart, and I guess maybe that's what brought her to nursing in the first place. But also, I witness this. It's such a. She's always got at the forefront what matters to people, what's going to impact on people. So it's that holding that at the forefront is really important to her. That heart. And making a difference in people's lives and in communities' lives. And that's coupled with a very sharp mind, incredibly bright, and that's, bringing that into the research space and looking at data and analysis and all the information. And those 2 come together so beautifully, and we're going to hear an example of that today about how information can inform what we do and make a change in what we do and how we do it and our ways forward. So those qualities I've observed and are very valuable and are valuable for all of us as we progress and make a difference around health literacy. So it's wonderful to have this chat with Shan today.
Thanks, Mara. I guess I wasn't expecting that. It's a lovely introduction, thank you. And I guess it is those 2 things that mean that this work that we'll be talking about today is more than just an academic exercise of crunching numbers. My mind doesn't work very well with numbers, but it's more about the stories, and they're the things that we're talking more about this afternoon.
We'll get used to this kind of 2 mic kind of moving little thing going on. I guess a good place to start then, because we're going to be hearing about a project that was commissioned by Public Health Services, as Diane did the introduction, and it involved doing a cluster analysis of Tasmanian ABS data, so Bureau of Statistics data. So let's start with what data were you looking at in particular?
Yeah. So in 2018, the Australian Bureau of Statistics did their health literacy survey as part of the National Health Survey data. So for us, that's really exciting because they used a tool called the Health Literacy Questionnaire. So if I click on the slides, will they work? Yep, they will work. There we go. So this is the what we call the Health Literacy Questionnaire, or the HLQ we call it for short. And on the left-hand side, you'll see there are 9 scales. So we've used the word health literacy a lot already today. And if we were to define what health literacy is or how people put it into use in their daily lives, it would be these 9 kind of things on the left-hand side. So in the ABS survey, they asked people whether they found these things difficult or easy, or whether they agreed or disagreed with the kind of statements on the right-hand side. So that's the data that we're looking at. But because it was within the whole big ABS survey, we were also able to pull out lots of social and demographic information to get a really good picture of what were people like who answered these kinds of questions. So the title of today is about getting beyond the average, because I'm just going to show you one snapshot. What you're looking at here is a comparison of the Tasmanian data with the national data. And what you'll see is they're nearly the same. So if we look at the average score for each of those 9 scales, they're nearly the same. So the Tasmanian average is nearly the same as the national average, which surprised me, knowing all of the things that we know about some of the challenges that we have in Tasmania. And this is why it's so important to get beyond an average score to understand more about what is really happening.
I think that will be a surprise for a lot of people, because I guess we talk a lot about our capacity and some of the stats and some of the experiences within the Tasmanian context. So data, very educational and revealing. And you've talked about, I guess we've talked about it being a cluster analysis. So Shan, what is a cluster analysis?
Okay.
And why do one?
Full disclosure, it's not something I'm comfortable with because it's about numbers. Okay, so this is how I would describe it. So this is a lay description of how I would understand it, and it's in pictures rather than numbers. So we have the 9 dimensions, or the scales of the HLQ, and we know that every person who completes the HLQ will have a specific score, so an average score for each of the scales of the 9 things. So they have a score for each of these 9 things. So that's one person. But then we know many people, when they answer it, will have the same kind of sets of answers, but they'll be different. So there'll be different combinations of scores within a particular population. So what a cluster analysis does is it tries to find people, or the different groups of people who have common scores. So they answer the scales in the same kind of way. So it's this kind of, like, I think of it as a sorting process. So they put all the green ones in one pile, the red ones, oops, sorry, go back. So you end up with this picture here, where you have a cluster analysis where every person in the group has the same kinds of scores to the answers. So that's what takes us beyond the average. So they're the average scores that each of the individuals have, but then it's looking at the groups of individuals who have the same averages. Yep.
Love the pics.
Yeah.
Very helpful. So just to check that I've got this right. So you get the ABS data from Tasmania, from the HLQ, and about how they access and use information and all those things. You pull it all together in clusters. Then you look at the numbers. A cluster looks at the numbers, but then you add the demographics and you end up with profiles.
Correct.
Cool.
Very good teach back, Mara. Very good.
Don't you love that? We're modelling.
Yeah.
That's why I had to write it down. So tell us more, because I understand there were 7 profiles that you identified. So can you tell us a little bit about those profiles?
Yeah. So when you do a cluster analysis, you do various combinations to work out which makes sense in terms of what you're looking at with the numbers and how many clusters that you can find. And in the Tasmanian sample, we found 7 clusters, so 7 different groups. So I'm going to put the numbers on the screen now. So if your mind is like mine and doesn't, just go with me with this. So here we have the numbers on the screen. So down the left-hand side, you have the cluster numbers, numbered 1 to 7. The next column is the number of people in those different clusters. So remember, a cluster is a group of people the same. So remember, put those pictures there to remind you. And then we colour code. So what you're looking at is the scores, the mean scores for each of those scales across each of the different clusters. And we colour code them to give an indication of the strengths and areas of need. So they go from green to more orangey, yellow ones for areas of need. Yeah.
So I'm curious, were there any surprises with the profiles?
There are a couple of surprises. One is that you'll note the largest cluster is number 5. Often we see the largest cluster sometimes closer to the top, so areas where there are more green. So it indicates there's quite a lot of need. The other thing that we can look at, if we just run our eye over it, sorry, we'll go back the other way, is if we looked at cluster 5, scale 5, for example, where it's about appraising information, there's a lot of people there indicating a lot of area of need. So people being able to work out what information is relevant to them and how to put it in practice in their daily life is an issue for people. But scale 9, for example, understanding information well enough to know what to do, is lots of green. It's an actual strength. So it's showing that lots of people can read and understand information. So for us as service providers, our intuition is often to give people more and more information, but the clue to people being able to use that is to know how to put it into practice, or to know what's right, what's wrong, what's relevant to them. So those kinds of things are really interesting.
Yeah, I keep thinking of so many things that you can do with that, and how we sometimes approach it. This kind of shifts our thinking around how you, as you say, kind of tackle and to be clearer around what actually is happening.
Yeah. Because what it's really saying is that different people have different needs and strengths and preferences. So again, getting beyond the average, that one size doesn't fit all. So if we don't want to leave anyone behind, then we need to make sure that we have more tailored responses.
And also recognising the complexity of people's lives, that people can be really strong in an area, but maybe not so strong in other areas. And sometimes we kind of group people together and think, oh, if people don't have, or, you know, one thing, they won't have other aspects, but in actual fact, it's much more nuanced than that.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So I guess that's the 7 profiles. And just to remind people, there is a handout. Everybody's received a handout, for everybody in the room and online as well. They should have that you can refer to, just to wrap your head around some of this information. But can we focus maybe on one profile, just to sort of get a sense of what that looks like if we go into a bit more detail, and how someone might use that information?
Yeah, sure. So we go to, we covered some of this. So we go to cluster 5, which is from the largest cluster. So you can see I've just cut out row 5 from that previous table. And these are people who generally can find information, but are sometimes not quite sure what it means or how to put it into practice. So rather than talk about numbers, what we do is we take all of the health literacy data and the social and demographic data and put it together to create a story, or what we call a vignette. So some of you may have been involved with some workshops that we ran earlier to develop these vignettes. So this is one of the ones we created. And this is the kind of socio and demographic data that we can draw on. So you see it's quite detailed, like the average age, levels of employment and education, the kinds of chronic conditions people may be living with. And on the right-hand side, because this was from the National Health Survey, there's lots of information about whether people do or don't meet the NHMRC food and dietary guidelines there as well, and physical activity. So we can put all of that together in a story. So this was the story of Marianne, and we can talk a little bit more in a moment about how this is used, but it's about meant to be representative of that cluster. So typical of people in that cluster. So we have 7 clusters, but we've developed about 10 or 11 vignettes, because you can have different scenarios per cluster. So you might have people in different social circumstances. And the idea with the vignettes is that they're meant to, people go, oh yeah, I know somebody like that, or you can relate to them as stories.
Yeah, I must say I love the profiles and the vignettes, and I've been in situations where it's been used, and it's interesting when someone shares a vignette in the story and everyone does say that, oh, that's just like my uncle, or that's just like that's like me even, and then examples of how you might then develop a service or do a response, or how you get education and information to them. So it makes it really real. I mean, we use scenarios and stories a lot in training as well, so there's so many ways it can be applied. Yeah. Any other sort of examples about how that's sort of used? That do you want to?
How we might use the vignettes. Yep. And we'll be doing this in the workshop this afternoon. And the key way that we do it is we will get, like today, a group of service providers or community members or both in a room or online together to discuss the vignettes. And What we do is we ask those questions. Do you recognise somebody like Marianne? So it's about getting to know that person. What kind of issues or problems stand out? And we don't spend too long on those two questions. It's really more about getting to know the person. And then the two most important questions are these ones. What do you think would help this person? And given that this person is someone from a group or a cluster, what do community services or community organisations need to do differently? So it's really looking at mining for that local wisdom or the way that people know, they know their community well. So what works for these people and how can we put that into practice? So from this, we generate like hundreds and hundreds of ideas. So that's what we'll be doing this afternoon. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that. I'm lucky enough to be in that workshop. I've heard you say, when we were kind of talking in preparation for today, that every voice has equal softness and equal volume, which just kind of caught me. I thought that was a lovely kind of phrase. Do you want to talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, and it's part of the principle of how we would work in this workshop scenario is that each person comes and brings their own wisdom about what they know about their community or their situation or their circumstance. So we listen like our lives depended on it, really. And it's about listening to people's stories, listening to what they know works, what doesn't work, and giving each voice an equal volume, so equal softness. Because often, we've all been in those groups where it's the loudest voice that gets heard all the time. We really pay attention to that softness and listening to that very carefully. Yeah.
So you've mentioned, I mean, there's lots of people here that for all different areas, workers and members of the community and so forth. So I guess what's interesting is wondering, say if there was a member of the community saying, well, what's in it for me? How's it is going to make a difference in my life? Like, and then we'll flip it and say, well, from an organisational point of view, because it's kind of picking up on both those aspects of health literacy. But let's start with a community member. How's it going to make a difference in their life?
Yeah. So for those, for community members, it's about service providers and organisations becoming more sensitive to those health literacy needs. Because it's not about, when we looked at all those pretty colours on the chart, it's not trying to turn all of those green. That's not it at all. It's not about trying to change the people. We can do that. We can build capacity, build capability, help people to understand information better. But that's not what we set out to do. It's about our job as service providers to respond to those different needs and strengths as we see them in the colours. So we're certainly not trying to do that. So the other couple of key things, and one, this is on your handout, it's like tiny on the screen, but it's on your handout. But this is really, like Kate was talking about the links between health literacy and access and equity. And that's what this diagram is about. It's showing how when people are trying to find help, find a service, they get filtered out along the way. That's why there's less people at the bottom in the shadow of that diagram than at the top, because not everybody gets to receive the service that they need, because there's a number of different ways they're filtered out. So in this diagram, what you see is sometimes we see problems like this, but if we put our health literacy glasses on or look at it from a health literacy perspective, we see it differently. And then we can start to break it down and understand. So if we look at this middle row example, and this is often around that intake procedure, and it's where a lot of people just don't get through that process. It's very, very hard. So if we start to think about it differently, then we can improve our responsiveness, our health literacy responsiveness, or the way that we react, accommodate, respond to those red, green and yellow needs from the previous table, rather than expecting everybody to be green and doing fine. So that's pretty key. The other thing in terms of our programs is the reach. And again, this comes back to the theme of today around leaving no one behind. So what this diagram shows, on the bottom you see you have, and even if you can think about the COVID messaging, as an example, when you think this through in your mind, you can think back, hey, yep, we've got some quick wins, we've got people hand washing and that sort of thing, social distancing, and then it kind of tapers off. And then if you want to optimise that a little bit, you can focus on the average health literacy. So remember what happens when the average hides all the diversity. But if you want to reach that theoretical maximum or 100%, then you really need to focus on those tailored health literacy responses. And that's where we leave no one behind if we do that. I mean, we know that the average person will respond to a public health message no matter how poorly designed it is, because that's just what the average person will do. But we're going to leave people behind when that happens. And people go, oh, it's just 30%, but it's so important, we can't afford to leave anyone behind. So that's those kind of 3 ways that I see this being really valuable and making a difference.
It reminds me of, I heard recently about drilling into data, how someone was talking about the average for a group of people and their health outcomes, and it was whatever it was, and yet when you drilled into it, there was a big difference between urban. I think it was to do with an Aboriginal community in far north Queensland, or something that I was listening to, and they were talking about how the experiences for people living in rural, remote areas was very different to urban, but when you clustered them all together, it came out as an average. And so that's a very different experience, and that's what you're saying, is that unless we kind of drill into it, if we go with the averages and we design for the average and we think about that, and often we do, we build these systems around what we know or the expectations, and then, as you say, people fall through the cracks and are not met, and their outcomes are obviously popping up in research, as we know, as being poorer. So, yeah. So we talked about what's in it for sort of what difference we can, from a community member's point of view. So from an organisational point of view, because that's such a, it was always a big aha moment for me working in health literacy to realise this is not, because often we used to think about, health literacy is about improving someone's health literacy, and actually it's not, it's about the system and the organisation being responsive. So from that point of view, what organisations, how can this be helpful for them, and what's in it for them?
And I think even using, with the vignettes, for example, they're really helpful for planning and evaluation. So when you're planning a program, you can look at the vignettes from the 7 different profiles and go, is this going to work for this person? What are we missing? What do we need to do extra? Or in the evaluation, you can do it in a similar kind of way. Being aware of the diversity within programs and within being able to respond differently to people is really important. Yeah.
Cool. I'm going to throw to the audience shortly, so just preparing you to warm up, because sometimes people need a little moment to warm up if they're going to ask a question. I just wanted to comment, I guess it's that remembering that working on this from both angles, isn't it? I remember when we were running workshops around communication and working with community members as well as working with workers and service providers and organisations, and how partnering, people coming together and sharing those stories across those is so powerful, and this is a great way to hear the voices of community members and what matters to them and how their experience is to keep that at the foreground, yeah. So, looking around the room, I didn't plant anybody to ask a question, so I'm hoping somebody is kind. Excellent, a hand coming up. Now, do we have a roving mic, or will I rove with my mic? I'm happy to rove with my mic.
Thanks, Mara and Shan. My name's Mary-Louise Bird, and I'm the knowledge broker for the Tasmanian Collaboration for Health Improvement. Just looking at Cluster 7, the bottom row is really red for being supported by health professionals. So to me, my question is, what can we do? Do we know anything about who those people are? Are they rural people? Are they people with multimorbidity? They seem to be like a good target for us to have special skills to be responsive to.
Yeah. Cluster 7 is are experiencing a lot of vulnerability and disadvantage. We know that most people in Cluster 7 are female. They're one of the younger clusters. They have the lowest level of education, so many of them didn't complete secondary school. We know there's high rate of unemployment. We also know that there are high rates of anxiety and depression for cluster 7. We know that a lot of them lived alone, so there's a lot of vulnerability there. And sometimes that vulnerability, so there's two, sometimes when we look at these clusters, we can look at, say, cluster 1 and think, what are the strengths that they have that we can look at trying to, what helps to make them really successful, as well as looking at cluster 7 in terms of what are their real strengths or what are their needs. So a lot of it is around their vulnerability in terms of their social circumstances. And what that does is it reduces the amount of resources that they have available to have those health literacy skills, to be able to have resources to manage their health and well-being, as well as where it puts it on their priority list for managing their health and well-being. So if you are reliant upon charitable organisations for meals, or your neighbourhood house for meals, etc., then you have very little control over what you're eating, in a sense. Or if you are using, so no, in some circumstances people will use emergency food relief as a way of managing their budget on a regular basis. So you have very little left over, very little resourcing for that. So it's very much shows us we hear often that health literacy is a social determinant, and also, there's this kind of interesting relationship between social determinants and health literacy being a social determinant in and of itself, and the relationship with education. Cluster 7 illustrates that very clearly, that relationship between those things. So in order to be effective in working with people experiencing vulnerability, a lot of it is about, I've just finished a major project in Melbourne with people living in social housing and their experiences during the pandemic. And one of the things that they did very well was what they called assertive outreach. So they had a mandate to literally knock on people's doors and see if they were okay, and give out masks and sanitizer and do isolation support, etc. But that process of knocking on doors, they found people they never knew existed, because they're not the people who are going to come and visit your nice, lovely community health centre because it's too hard, or they're scared, or they're frightened, or they don't have resources, or they didn't even know you were there, let alone you know they were there. So it kind of opened the door to a whole lot of things. So sometimes that assertive outreach can be really helpful. And even if it's not literally knocking on doors, it's taking services to community. So we did lots of pop-up vaccination hubs. I went up to like Bendigo, for example, and we did vaccination clinics in the Karen Community Temple. So it is about taking the services to where people are, rather than waiting for people to come, particularly people who are experiencing a lot of disadvantage and vulnerability. Yeah, but good question, yeah.
Great question. Kind of, I was thinking about the social determinants, and how two things that struck me was about resources. Like how can we expect people when the resources are so thin on the ground? And I guess aloneness too, that thing about, aloneness and who helps, that we all need support and help, or whatever that might look like. So.
Yeah, for sure.
I'll just do a time check with my timekeeper. I didn't understand that. we didn't quite work out our system at all. I've got heaps of time. Oh, okay, well, right, okay. I actually didn't know how much time we started with, so...
So Liz has, so Julie has a question.
Excellent, Julie.
Shan, I don't know if you know the answer to this question, but in collecting the ABS collecting this data, for people who don't speak English, were they included with interpreters services, or are they excluded from the data?
I don't know with the ABS. It is interesting that cluster 7 has also the lowest number of people who speak English at home, but in saying that, it was only, it had the highest number of people who were born overseas. So it's about 25% who were born overseas. But most of the people who completed the survey spoke English at home. So I don't actually know that. We do have some indications of cultural and linguistic diversity, but I would say that it's probably a limitation, and that's the thing. So it points to, this is giving us a picture of there's 591 Tasmanians who completed this survey, and we know that's a tiny amount of people who live on the islands, but so if you wanted to look at a particular group, it would be very worthwhile collecting local data, and then you would be able to compare with the Tasmanian as well as the national kind of information to get a sense of the particular needs of that group. Because when you think about, and what you've raised, Julie, is a limitation of who actually gets to participate in ABS survey data. That's a big limitation of this data set, because it's possibly not people that we would, there would be many people who are missing out on participating. So when we collect the HLQ, the Health Literacy Questionnaire data, we go to extreme lengths to find people, and we try to reach people who researchers don't usually reach. So we do that by going out in the community, and we've also done it very successfully in a New South Wales mental health project, where we actually worked through 10 community advisors, so 10 people or community groups, so like ACON, a group for people living with functional neurological disease or disorder. So lots of different community groups who had access to the people that we wanted to reach, and they were able to reach further than we could ever do. It was a great project. That was a particular amount of scope creep for me as the research lead, but it was great. We got lots and lots of people.
There was that point before about soft voices and all that, isn't it? Some voices are excluded, and that's our responsibility, isn't it? To kind of makes me realise too that this research is in many ways a starting point, isn't it? So that you can see some examples of how you can go around kind of gathering data, but there's not going to there's places to go with that, and to get more particular to your area or to your area of work or organisation.
For sure, and because one of the other limitations that we have with ABS data is what they call small cell data. So when you have 591 people, sometimes you'll have less than 10 people, and we're not allowed to report on that because it's potentially identifying. So the tiny numbers we can't report on, so we have lots of gaps. So again, locally collected data, you can report on that because it's yours. So, yeah.
And having been involved in sort of looking at the vignettes too, it's an opportunity when you kind of look at profiles to then kind of think about, well, what else is there that we know and bring to that story, and then pull out some of those other things about, well, we also know this about people who might have not speak English at home, or people who, whatever the circumstances might be, so that we can bring those voices in as well in consideration. I think Kate's got a question, and then there's someone there, I'm not sure your name, but Sue, I'll just go to Kate first.
So I was just going to ask you about the use of the vignettes and how you've used them in the past, because one of the things about research, we know lots of people would use it if they could access what it really meant, and sometimes it's indecipherable. But when you take the stories, I've noticed taking stories to communities, it bridges the gap between what we've learned and what they already know. So it's almost like that's the next step. As you said, Mara, this is just a starting point. So have you used this in community groups? And I'd just like to hear about how that was.
Yeah, we have used them in community groups, and again, probably a recent example is in the New South Wales Mental Health Project, and we talked, it was an amazing experience. We had to put everything, it was in the middle of COVID, so we couldn't even get to New South Wales, so it was very different. We had to put the workshops online, and but it was incredible, a really rich experience, and actually gave us, people were able to participate possibly more than we thought, but from the the ideas and using those 4 questions that we saw, we were able to come up with what we call it's a mental health literacy responsive framework. So we were able to really identify the ways that people with a lived experience of mental health would like health services to respond to them, how they would like them to be. So we've been using that to develop a series. We developed a series of education and training workshops to build the capacity of workforce to enact those. And we turned 4 of the vignettes into a multimedia resource. So there are 3 that are video and 1 that's audio only. And again, they have the same questions at the end so that people can keep using those in an ongoing way for those communities. But in the social housing project that I mentioned, we used them with the frontline staff, and it was immediate translation. There was an urgent need for this information. We had to work out how to get the messages out there better and quicker and faster and be more effective. So we ran like action learning workshops using the vignettes. So people generated hundreds of ideas about, we know this is working, we know that's working, we need to do more of this, and that didn't work. And it was a really good process of for the teams to come together and work through how to do it better. It's very good. Yeah. Thanks.
I was involved recently with some vignettes we used, and I was in a workshop that had workers in it, but they also took the same vignettes to community members, so I can't kind of comment on that because I wasn't there, but and that was to do with maternal and antenatal care, and so it was very much about kind of working out, well, what are some of the issues happening in this area and what we could do. And so the vignettes, as I said, so as workers we got together and looked at those vignettes and said, oh, well, we could do this and this and this, and these are some ideas for the researchers and the people working on the project to look at. And they took that also to community members, so people who had recently accessed or were accessing kind of those services and asking for their input. So that's another example. And as I said, because they're vignettes, there's some stories you can kind of add to them, and you can sort of, oh, well, I think we need to kind of help Helen do this, and I think if we do this, with Helen, it kind of comes alive in a way that if you're kind of just talking, it's sort of a bit dry. Sue. I'll come to you.
Hi, I'm Sue Newman from Keynote, Tasmania. A couple of things. I think poverty and age go across all of those, preventing access to each of those different things. And I guess I'm interested in so the different marginalised groups of people or disadvantaged groups. What factor does age and poverty play?
Yeah, it plays a very large role. And so even though the averages are the same, when we were comparing the age, so the Tasmanian population was generally older than the national average, we also found significantly more people experiencing disadvantage, particularly financial disadvantage, like the income brackets were all skewed to the left. So we know that they do play a large role, and probably one of the larger parts of that is around digital health literacy, and that it comes across both the poverty as well as age. And I know that, again, drawing on that experience in social housing in Victoria, like none of those towers have Wi-Fi. So you have people at McDonald's trying to access health information, or people unable to, they don't have smartphones, or they do, but they are able to use them in a very limited way, or younger people lose them or run out of data, and it just goes across the board. But that digital health literacy in particular, really, there was what they call a digital divide before COVID, and with the acceleration of technology during COVID, we've left more and more people behind, and they feel like they're never going to catch up. And that's a huge gap, a really big gap, and particularly, I know the infrastructure in Tassie's improved a little bit, but there's still big patches of black spots and things. So yeah, it's a big issue.
Seems like all the data that's come out in recent times is showing the amplification of those that inequity that existed previously is just getting wider. So, you know, with the whatever that data source might be, it's definitely there. We've got a hand up. You've got a microphone. I can get back into my chair.
In my former employment at the Flying Doctors, one of the things we found was the functional literacy.
Yeah.
So simple things now, I'll use our dental program as an example. Previously, you go into school and you screen everyone and treat them. Now you need written permission. We found in the early days that 30% of the parents couldn't read the permission forms. So the kids who needed probably the treatment better than the better educated parents missed out, so we had to work around that. A bit like the digital divide that linked to functional literacy. So I was surprised with those figures that showed us on the national average, because in every other health area that's just not the case. But that functional literacy issue, if you can't read the permission form, if you can't read the description that is written on the pills that you're getting from the pharmacy, from the doctors, is that picked up in your clusters?
Yes, it is, and it comes up in particular. It's not like there's a test of functional literacy, and I guess it's an assumption in terms of the level of education, because there are lower levels of education, particularly in some of the older clusters. So it is an issue, and like attrition at school has always been a big problem in Tassie, and that functional literacy does definitely play a big role. I guess part of it though, like as you would have found, John, like is people get very good at covering that, and you know, it's not until somebody introduces a new process, or you know, you need written consent now, that those things become more evident, because it's a lifelong skill of covering up functional literacy issues, or getting by. Issue.
There's also examples, I guess, of resilience in that too, isn't it? Where people, and I'm not taking anything away from the impact of functional illiteracy and stuff, but also that, I guess, remembering the strengths that people have and how they develop strategies and partnerships, and in some cases can be strong in other areas of health literacy in terms of asking, like in terms of their verbal communication skills, or their capacity to kind of demand things in some cases. So. But definitely the relationship between social determinants of health and equity, and I guess that's why priority populations too, picking up on the point that Sue made around from COTA and ageing, is recognised in the Healthy Tas plan. We do know that just those things make a huge impact. I think we've got 5 minutes, so time for another question. Is there anybody? Yes, we've got, thanks Rhonda,
Good morning, Dr. Shan. I'm from 2610. I am wondering what came out of the data that surprised you or challenged the assumptions of the project?
Yeah, and I think it's good to know you're here, Sarah. 2610 do a great job. Thank you, particularly around the work that John was mentioning before. I think part of it was the size of the clusters with greater need, like towards, as I say, like cluster 5, almost to the bottom of the table. That was the surprise. The other was around I think the level of disadvantage, and like the really clear patterning of those social determinants across them. But again, like, I think the biggest surprise was that early slide of seeing that, gosh, if we just stopped at the national average and the Tasmanian average, there's no work to be done here. Like, we could all go home. So that was a big shock to see that being very, very similar, even though we know that when we look at all the demographics, there's plenty of evidence there to show it's not the same, and etc. So it says a lot about going beyond those average scores. Yeah.
So I was just thinking of a final question, and I was thinking, what would you urge people to do from here? What would you want to see people walk away today and do? We often think, what do we want people to do, having listened to Shan's presentation and the research and the findings and stuff? What what would you like people to do?
Yeah. I think it is really about getting beyond the average. And what I mean by that is that build your services and systems for the people who have the most challenges, because it's going to fit everyone. And it really is being more mindful of and not making those assumptions about what people can and can't do, and really thinking about, if I was really challenged in this setting, because remembering, as Kate said in the introduction, that health literacy is not a dynamic state, that if we're in a situation where we're highly stressed, something's gone wrong, you're experiencing an illness, etc., your health literacy skills, they depart. It's difficult, it's harder, and the health system's hard enough, let alone when you're really experiencing high levels of stress. So, yeah, really thinking about what are challenging people the most. Thinking about, people don't need more and more information. It doesn't matter how nicely, plainly you write it. It's not about more and more information. It's helping people find it, helping people work out what's relevant to them, all the other things that sit alongside that information. So, yeah, give the pamphlets a rest and build on the other skills.
And also look at our systems and processes and all that, because you can have a complex pamphlet on how to navigate a complex system, but maybe we could make the system less complex, if that makes sense.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, I think that's time, just because, yes, have I got nods from the timekeepers? I think we're at a time. So on behalf of us all, I would like to thank, I think you've seen a little bit of what I said before about the qualities of Shan's heart and her mind, and we really appreciate the work you've done and also what you've shared with us today, and it's really going to make a difference for all of us and Tasmania. Thank you so much, Shan.
Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah.
And Shandell, it's really nice to have more context and understanding, and there'll be great opportunities to pick Shandell's brain a little bit more, both in the breaks but also in this afternoon's session. And as they both mentioned, it really is just the beginning of a conversation, and Tassie has got great opportunity to build on this information around health literacy going forward, being the size of state we are, but also with this data that we've already got and the analysis that we've already done on it, we've got a great opportunity to build even more understanding and better meet the needs of all our Tasmanians. I've been a dreadful MC because I forgot to actually tell you all the housekeeping. So I do apologise. So I do hope you found the toilets. And also if there's fire alarms, etc., we just go out the main doors and we're guided by the fire wardens. Hopefully you've all met the trade tables out the front there, and there'll be people to help you out there, answer questions, etc. So please take advantage of that. We've got lovely Kylie Dunn over in the corner here doing some graphic recording for us. So thank you, Kylie, very much for that. And she will be also coming in and out of rooms during the day as well with our afternoon sessions. Also, I want to acknowledge as well again that Primary Health Tasmania are sponsoring the recording of this session, so even for the online guys, this will be available for anyone who's not been able to make this morning or today. So yeah, who's heard of social prescribing? Oh yeah, there's lots of hands in the room. So our next conversation, I'm going to hand over to Michelle and Nerida. And I look forward to this session as Michelle unpacks with Nerida what it means, how it's been happening, and also, most importantly, what have been the results of what they've been doing. You've got the lapel? No?
Are you on?
Thanks, Di. You're on.
You're
Fantastic.
Welcome, Nerida.
Thank you.
We're very excited to have you here in Tasmania.
Thank you.
I'd love to introduce you to all these people, but we'll have to keep it quick. So everybody, this is Nerida. Nerida, this is everybody. As you saw, there are some people, but not everyone, who knows what social prescribing is. Can I do another quick poll? Can you put your hand up if you would identify yourself as being a health worker or working in the health system? And then all those who didn't put their hand up, put your hand up now. So you're amongst friends, and we heard there's 2610, and there are other library type people here. Yeah, look at that. Fabulous. So I'll introduce myself properly. My name is Michelle Towle. Thank you for the modelling, Mara. My pronouns are she and her. And I work as health promotion consultant for the Tasmanian Health Service. We work very strongly with people in the community, and libraries are always in our little circle of friends because we know how important they are to health and wellbeing. I might just do a little bit of scene setting for you in terms of Nerida and where she's come from. So Nerida is based in Echuca Moama on the border between Victoria and New South Wales. So that's a region of sort of roughly 40,000 people. There's 10 libraries, lots of them are quite little. I'm thinking like the sort of shoebox that is like a library that we have in Penguin, for example. But some of the really exciting work that she's been doing is around some of that outreach that was just spoken about before, about doing that really assertive community outreach in a social and recreational support role for more than 5 years in those communities. And Nerida comes to us from, on the River Murray, out of Yorta Yorta country, and so we welcome you to Lutruwita, Tasmania, land of the Palawa Pakana people. Just out of interest, the libraries there are managed by local government, which is a tiny bit different to how we do it in Tassie. So, for those people who aren't familiar with social prescribing, can you tell us a bit about what that is and some more about your project?
Yep, so social prescribing is, in an absolute nutshell, social and recreational support. But what we're looking at is working with health professionals to get them thinking in terms of non-medical interventions that help people in regards to their mental health and well-being, isolation, getting them reconnected with their communities. So it's working, in our instance, we work with primarily individuals to determine what their interests are, what their likes are, what they need in terms of improving their personal well-being, and then trying to connect them back into their community, or access a group, or just get involved in something they love. And we also understand that for many people, reconnecting back into that community physically is just not a possibility. So we also have a range of services that literally go into their homes and support them. And just a really quick example of that is a lovely little group that we've created, where we've got, they do happen to be all ladies, and that's not being sexist in any way, who can't leave their homes due to physical and transport limitations. And they're now a lovely little connected knitting group for us, who make caps for the babies in the hospitals, and fetal mats for our dementia facilities, and wrist fiddles, and they even connect by Zoom so that they can have a little chat as well, which is just a lovely side that happened and came about by listening to them and then suddenly thinking, hey, we could do this and let's try that, and what if we actually connect them? So just an example.
I really love that example, because digital literacy is a big part of what our libraries do, and I'm sure in many communities, but the way you told it when I heard that story yesterday was that we had this person knitting and we had that person knitting. Neither of them are very mobile physically. How about we just support them to use the iPads that they already have, and they can knit together from their own homes. That's a beautiful way of doing it.
Yes, they just love it, and they do love me running errands of wool between them now, which I did say to Michelle yesterday, we probably don't mention that to the manager. Why I took that detour was to deliver pink wool to somebody who desperately needed it.
And everybody has some wool in their back cupboard, so it's all coming out. Can you give us some more examples of some of the programs that you're linking people into or taking into their homes?
Yeah, so obviously I'm from a public library background, and that's my bias and passion. And so initially our thoughts were, how could we get more people into our libraries? That's why I came along. But quickly recognised that actually it's not about getting people into our libraries, it's about getting us out to those people who, for whatever reason, and there are 100 reasons, can't come to us, and thus the outreach came about. But then we also quickly realised, don't quote me, libraries are not the be-all and end-all. We'd love to be, and we sometimes perhaps pretend to be or think we are. But, there are great neighbourhood houses and community organisations, and there are even groups that have just come about naturally within a community that don't have any technical community or organisational capacity, but they get together. So whatever the need is, or the aspiration, or the want of the individual, is to connect them back into that community in any capacity. Biasly to the library, to one of our sessions or activities or crafts, but we don't want to double up on what our community houses and neighbourhood houses are offering. So we're very careful to know who's doing what and who's offering what, and to connect them as equally to the neighbourhood houses and the community services.
So you are kind of pushing on some boundaries there in terms of extending what libraries have traditionally done, and maybe creeping into potentially other people's territory a little bit in terms of being in their homes and some soft mental health support, if I can put it like that. Have you met some resistance along the way, a bit of pushback to that?
When we first started, there was a lot of why libraries? Like, what are you guys doing? You read and educate and research, and you're wandering off the path. But like I said, we were very careful to try and take the community organisations and the health organisations on the journey with us, and understand that we're not in competition and we're not trying to take from anybody. We're actually trying to partner and work together and provide better opportunities for our community members that are often left behind. And certainly COVID has really highlighted that even a perfectly functioning, active adult out in the community, when the circumstance change, can very quickly have their well-being significantly impacted. And one person, and I know we also, this is not me just delivering this, but one person can make a significant difference in someone's life just by giving them some time and really, really listening. And I think, Michelle, you said in the car, you've been practicing about being in the moment for yourself and being in the moment for other people, and that's really what it's all comes down to, is really genuinely hearing what they're saying and then building on that to support them back into life.
Yeah, that what I just called soft mental health support is really just having a broader range of people who can be present and listen without judgment, and what a huge gift that is, and a very significant therapeutic tool to, as you say, bring people back to wellness. That's a long conversation, and we talked a little bit in the car too about trauma, in the sense that there may be plenty of people who are functioning well, and it takes something like a pandemic or some other life challenge, yes, there to undo them in some ways, or to make things harder all of a sudden. Just to paint more of a picture, can you give us some of the nuts and bolts of, it isn't just you, you're a significant part, I get that, but how many people are involved, and what do you do day to day?
Yeah, so yes, I am the overseer and the coordinator, and yes, I am the passion behind it. But we had a wonderful team of 160 volunteers that support the program in many capacities. We go into individual homes and, like I said, our goal is to re-engage them back out into the community, but sometimes that's not possible, so we have services that go into those homes purely around social and recreational support. Just keep that in mind. We do signposts to other interventions if it's, something to do with homelessness or financial, my aged care. Actually, technically we do that within the library, but it's a different department. We signpost them and we guide them and we'll support them there. But our main goal is about, the pleasure of playing a game of cards, or doing a puzzle, or having a conversation, or giving a carer just a break where our volunteer goes in and, for example, someone with dementia might tell them the same story every time they go, and our volunteers are asked to respond with enthusiasm, and I've never heard that before, because that's important to them, and it gives the carer a break and knows that their loved one is happy and content. And we're not respite in any capacity, we're company and recreational support. We also go into care facilities because a lot of residents just don't have a support network, don't have family to visit, don't have a friend to visit. And just because they reside in a care facility doesn't mean they shouldn't have the services that somebody in a home would have access to. So we go into care facilities with the same purpose: company, conversation, a cup of tea. Our goal there is to get them involved within the activities within the care facility because they offer those, or if they are mobile enough, back out into the community, depending circumstance. And we offer a range of wellbeing programs, so which can be done within our libraries. So we offer them within our libraries, and groups and individuals come to us, and we go to care facilities and we go to community halls, and pretty much anyone can come. It is a booking thing, but we find that we'll get, for example, half a dozen residents from one of our care facilities, and then we'll get 3 or 4 or 5 individuals from the community, and it creates that lovely interaction and social connection without having to join a group or have a membership or, that commitment that sometimes comes with, I'll go to a group meeting or I'll go to it's as they feel. And the wellbeing we offer, the wellbeing programs we offer, and I always fall off the wagon because I forget one, is a memory box, which is like an antique roadshow. We do iPad games. We do history or mystery, which is where our researchers research the local history of the area, and we tell them a story, and we tell them a fib and challenge them to pick the fib. Not that we librarians would ever fib. We do oversized puzzles. We do a conversation hat. We do a creative arts, which is messy and lovely, and supported by the National Gallery. Forgot to count, but it's all programs, and laughter yoga, because we love laughter yoga. It's all programs really that just give you a moment to relax and feel good and have a chat with somebody, and there's no obligation or commitment for ongoing, but it just keeps running, so.
Fabulous. So you've got yourself and 160 volunteers who are engaging with people in the community, particularly those who are less likely to walk through your door. To the library or to the community house or to the other services that are around, and really finding out what is meaningful and of interest to them so they can connect back into the community, or as I heard you say, you can take the community to them if that's not very easy for them to come in. What about the people who we might have said are hard to engage with, but perhaps people who are living with some disadvantage or some anxiety or some health conditions that could probably really do with linking in, but are really hesitant to do so? How do you engage with them?
I should probably just backtrack a little bit and say that we have partnered with all of our local health services and our allied health, so not through our GPs because they're overloaded with the world before COVID, let alone after COVID. And they actually directly refer to us. So they're the main source of our referral, and they connect us with people who would probably never have stepped foot in a library or would not consider coming to a library because, why would they need a library? So our hospital, transitional care, our hospital to home, all of those programs refer directly to me, clients that they think could benefit from our social support. And I think they're the main source of the people that you're talking about. And the patients that sometimes represent at the GP over and over, not so much for a medical requirement, but for the support and the security of somebody they know and trust. So we try to break that cycle by going into their homes, into their comfort zone, with their permission, and then re-engaging them. And it does take, it's not one visit, it's never one visit, it's never two visits. And the lovely thing about our program is it's actually unending. So if you want to stay on our program for the remaining days of your life, we're there to support you. We're not there every week because we hope to get you to a position where you're quite comfortable. But we continue to check in and make sure you're okay. And are you still attending the movie day? Are you got other interests? Have some new things come up, or would you be interested in this? And you know, some people I might give them a phone call. How you going, Fred? Yeah, I'm really, really great. Haven't seen you for a while. Would you like me to drop round? Nah, everything's good. You just give me a call in 6 months. Yeah, I'll do that, Fred. No worries at all. You know, so I mean, it's just them knowing that you're actually still there if they need that little bit of extra support. But community members and family too. We go, my manager and I, we go to as many, all the service provider meetings and health provider meetings and as many community group meetings as we can, and say to people, you know, if suddenly Susie stops coming to your Provis meeting and you're like, gosh, we haven't seen Susie for a couple of weeks, we can do a welfare check. Just go in, make sure she's doing okay, see what's going on, have a conversation, have a cup of tea, suss it out on the side, I like to say, between you and I, and see if there is something that's going on that we can support to get her back to Provis, or whether she's had another Provis and she's joined the U3A, who would know. But, you know, it's amazing who comes out of the woodwork when you've got your whole community thinking in that space, that there's somebody that can go to my neighbour and just knock on the door and have a cup of tea, or make a phone call and say, I'm coming round for a chat. And despite all the people that I ring and I go, hey, it's Nerida from the Compasity Library, oh, have I got an overdue book? That's if they've been to the library before. Or, why is the library calling me? Actually, you know, the health service just raised with me that you might like somebody to have a chat with, and I'm the person to have a chat with. Can I come around and have a cup of tea? Nobody said no to me. Thank goodness, because I'm not sure what I do when they do, but I'll work around that. You know, they're keen for comfort and company in their own home. So, hope that helps.
Yes, fabulous. Are there criteria for people to be involved?
Yeah, there are, but it's really, really broad. So, obviously, you know, health, mobility, loneliness, isolation, family support, and there are people in our community who have quite a significant family, but that doesn't mean they actually have connection and communication and support from that family. So it's that level of support out of a health service that they have. We visit every referral we're given, regardless. And I'm not saying we help every referral, because some of them I re-refer back to the health service and say, you know, I understand what your intention is and where your purpose is, but this person needs additional help that we can't provide, because we're not a health service, we're not, you know, medical base. But when they get to that next stage or that better position, we can go in then, just not right now. And sometimes people actually don't need so much like the social support. I can refer them on to housing, I can refer them on to financial support, I can refer them on to you know, our food banks. That's not us. It's, I guess, signposting on to other points of support and assistance, because it is amazing when you sit and build a little bit of rapport with somebody and have a conversation and genuinely hear what's being said behind the words, what it is they need or want to make their life better.
I heard a beautiful quote that was that relationships build at the speed of trust, and social movements build at the speed of relationships. So I hear how very core it is to sit and be with those people and figure out what does connection look like for them, and what does something meaningful look like for them. Can you tell us some of your favourite stories about impact?
Yeah, I will. So I'll actually, we talked about Jim yesterday, but today I'm going to tell you about Graham, who, and I know, we're not allowed to have favourites, but he's one of my favourites. So Graham was referred to me when he was 88, and he'd had a multiple heart bypass it had all gone well, but he had, I guess, really withdrawn. His wife had passed a long time earlier, they'd had no children, and in his own words, he had outlived all his friends, so what was the purpose of fixing his heart when he had nothing to go on for? And I purely started visiting him, company, conversation, trying to figure out what he liked. And he used to play golf, but no, he was too old for that. And he had always wanted to ride a bike, but he was too old for that. And I'm like, you've got this new heart, you know, let's test it out. Let's give it a run. You know, let's just go for a walk. And there's a beautiful walking track around where he lives. So we did the short version and then we do the long version. And then he was amazingly, amazingly fit. It was just he thought he wasn't because his heart was obviously giving him trouble. Anyway, I actually visited for several weeks, just literally around conversation and having our walks. And I get there this day and he's like this little puppy at the door. That's the only way I can explain it. And I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? He's like, I've bought something, can't wait to show you. Bought himself a bike. I'm like, uh-oh. I did intend well, but maybe I didn't think that through. He's now bike rides all the tracks. We've just, if you don't know, Chukamoema, border town on the Murray, had a significant bridge built across the Murray to connect the two states, thank goodness. He's been spending, you know, every second weekend he rides out to watch the construction of the bridge. He doesn't take any, you know, public, it's all bike tracks. He goes, gets himself to all the bike tracks. He bought a bike that can fold up because he's got a younger mate down the road, 83, who'll drive him somewhere and drop him off so he can ride back. He's also, he says, the youngest golfer out on the course, and there's 3 of them now from the same area. One has a licence, he picks up the other 2 young fellas. They're 83, 87, and he's now 90. And they play golf once a week and go out for a coffee. And my favourite part of this is just 2 weeks ago I popped out just to check on him, see how he's going. He says, oh, I forgot to tell you, he also joined Probus, which is lovely, and they do bus trips, and he tells me about his bus trips all the time. And he says, I'm seeing somebody. I'm like, oh, wow. He said, but I really need your approval, would you meet her? I'm like, Graham, do you like her and is she kind to you? And he's like, oh, she's very nice, but I really need your approval. I'm like, you absolutely have my approval even though I haven't met her, because I know that if you love her, you know, and enjoy her company, then that's all it needs, you know, for me. No, I'm not a romancer, but I was just so, I went back to the office and went, oh my God, you'll never guess what's just happened. But I just think, you know, this is a man who at 88 was going to wither away in his unit and not re-engage in the world and had lost purpose. And all I did was sit and listen and have conversation and I guess encourage him. The bike might be my fault, probably. Sorry. And I did have a lot of nerves about that to a start, like, you know, can you make sure you take your phone with you and perhaps you should tell your neighbour where you're going? But it's all worked out wonderfully. And yeah, he just is so enthusiastic about life now. Pride and joy.
What I'm hearing is that he has so much trust in the lady from the library that he needs your permission to go out with his new girlfriend. That's fabulous.
Probably.
And we heard some stories yesterday at the Devonport Library about how important the ladies from the library are in some people's lives who visit there every day. That's their social outing. I might touch on one more thing before we open up for a couple of questions. So for those of us who are wanting to do this more, it strikes me there's a bit of a hierarchy from we can just signpost to people, say, oh yes, there's this and there's that and there's that, and we can advertise all the things that are going on in our community for people to join in. We can do warm referrals where we're calling up and making a human connection or literally taking the person there, moving right up to what you're doing, which is that really assertive outreach and being with people for long enough and holding their hand metaphorically or maybe sometimes literally, to get them to new places, to do new things, to make that connection. Have you got tips for us to take the next step and to push those boundaries of where we're sitting at the moment with this approach?
Firstly, I say be absolutely open to anything. You know, when I very first said to my manager, do you think I could borrow the iPads and the kids' games that go with it and go out to a dementia group and play iPads with them? She's like, do you think you should join that dementia group? You know, so please be really, really open to anything, and be open to partners that might appear to you to be outside the square. You know, when I first went to the health services and you know, public libraries want to play in their space, they were like, books, lady, off you go, what are you doing here? And now at the service providers network, they just don't even think twice. They're like, hey, so what are you up to? What's going on? You know, how can we help you? What's new? What's needs support? You know, which is just lovely. And I know that I can go to them and say, you know, this is what a client's thrown at me, and it's out of my knowledge in terms of, you know, health support. What's your recommendation? And they bandy it round with them, and another person might respond. And I think that's great, because it's not just me connected to Michelle, or, you know, me connected to Jane. It's the whole department that consider me as part of their team, even though I'm a public library person, you know, an information specialist. So think out of the box, be absolutely patient, and be prepared to tell your stories or sell your case, go over and over and over and over and over again. And when it comes to actually people in their homes and in the care facilities, you've got to be absolutely flexible. Because I can tell you, I've gone to a house, knocking on the door, Mary's gone, oh, it's you today. But I've got, you know, the hair appointment. No worries, Mary, can I come back tomorrow? Oh, that'd be lovely, you know. Or I go take my iPads into a care facility and I've got 20 residents waiting to competitively play hangman against each other in the machine, and then I nearly swore then, the blessed iPads won't work and the technology doesn't come together, because we love technology at the best of times, don't we? And it's, you know, and then I say to them, well, you know what technology's like, it won't work, let's do laughter yoga today. You know, you've got to be prepared for anything and really flexible for anything. But have a go, truly. The benefits for your community are just huge. And I'm possibly biased, no surprise, but it's not actually that hard. It's not actually that complex. Yes, I'm really lucky because our library service have supported us stepping outside of the walls of the library and expanding our outreach. And I love your assertive, you know, outreach. That's, I guess, what it is. We literally do knock on doors and sit on couches. And I've even nursed a chook, because it's the only way I could get the man to come around to me. And I went home and rang my dad and said, well, I met Geraldine and Jill today and I had to nurse them, and I'm a farm girl, but I'm a little traumatised. So, you know, be prepared for anything. Maybe I do go further than the extra mile, but it's so worth it to be able to help your community and have them think about our service in that different way, out of books and education and research, and around creativity and support and social opportunity.
Fantastic. Happy to have some questions from the floor. I see Rhonda's got the roving mic. And thanks. Hayley, I know.
Uh-oh, it's the librarian in the room.
It's the librarian.
No, I'm Jess Panday, and I do work at Libraries Tasmania, but I'm actually not a librarian, so I just wanted to point out that libraries are much bigger, and I'm really happy to hear what you're actually saying, because we are very much looking at reaching out into the community. What I'm actually interested in, though, is how do you manage those large numbers of volunteers, and what's the kind of training that you expect them to do? So Libraries Tasmania, for example, I work in the literacy numeracy area, and we have quite significant requirements around compliance for all our volunteers. How is that managed?
So we do have a council volunteer coordinator who coordinates training in terms of if they're doing our home library deliveries, they do training around lifting, risk assessment, looking after themselves, OH&S, I guess the standard training. So I don't have to manage that part, but they are all expected to undertake those regular trainings. Some of it, most of it is online and was online before COVID anyway, but they tend to come into our libraries to do that online training, and that's fine because they can do it in a little group, or they can do it in a supported environment, or they can do it at home at their own pace if they want. In terms of the outreach services, they each undertake a training induction and program within our library that's specific to what service they're providing. So if they're going into a care facility and doing what we call our Words on Wheels, which I didn't mention, which is a reminiscing program, you know, they undertake a very simple training program within the library, and at their first couple of sessions they're actually accompanied by a staff member who knows the ins and outs of that program to be there to back up, to guide, to support until they're comfortable to go by themselves. In terms of going into homes, obviously it's actually more rules about what you can't do than what you can do, and remembering why you're there. And you know, you're there for company and social support. You can play a game of cards, you can play a board game, but you can't change a light bulb, and you can't take a letter to mail, and you can't walk their dog unless they're actually walking that dog with you, if that makes sense. It's more about the no's than the go's. But I find in terms of, we're very fortunate, they're very empowered and love what we do. And when you've got a volunteer base that are like that, they take such little management because they love what they're doing. They can see the benefits of it. They get benefits back themselves. And I just can't explain how empowered they are to take on the task and the responsibility, and it's something that's valued by them, but it's as equally valued by us, and they understand that.
I was the timekeeper last time, but if Hayley's got a short question, can we do that? Short question, Hayley?
My question's short, but the answer may not be. What I'm interested in is, you mentioned that what you're doing is kind of a radical departure from the core brief of where you're working. And I guess most of us would like to massage where we work to be more flexible. Interested in how you managed to pull that off.
As brief as I can, pretty much I was employed on a 6-month contract to come in and work out how to attract more people into the library, and it very quickly became aware that that really wasn't what was needed. What was needed was us to get outside of our walls. And why should a library be dictated by its building? And it was really planting that seed of, you know, we go out for children's activities, we go out for kindergartens, you know, we go out for school holiday activities. Why can't we go out for our community that actually can't come to us? So it really was planting that seed, and possibly a little bit of good fortune in that the person that I was originally selling it to didn't think I was crazy and was willing to run with it. Sorry, because sometimes it really is having the right person to hear it, and I consider myself very fortunate, you know, in almost being given free rein to develop it. But I also think that once I identified what I guess the need was, it sort of developed itself. So at no stage in those first years did we refer to this as social prescribing. We referred to this as social and recreational support. And then it was literally in COVID that my manager rang me at home and went, "Oh my God, I've just read this amazing UK report and they're talking about you. You're doing that every day." And it has evolved even further with our learnings from the UK, and they're link workers, and it is different to ours because, like I said, we are social and recreational, but a little bit of luck, sorry.
Thank you so much, Nerida, for sharing all that connection and community, and even though you're just a farm girl from Northern Victoria, we're excited to have you here just to have these conversations, and look forward to more of that in the next couple of days, and do catch up at morning tea and lunch. Thank you.